My most recent revelation has been how much time I spend hate watching TikTok videos. But a more useful revelation that I'd like to talk about today is something that I kind of thought about on guitar. I've been playing live outdoor gigs more recently with my buddy Pasha, who is an awesome violin player. And the interesting thing about doing songs with a violin lead player and, guitar accompaniment, I guess, is just kind of like, it's made me think about just music and like the role of music in general, because we'll just play whatever requests that we're given. Like somebody requested some Beethoven, it's like, okay, Beethoven on guitar. Like Pasha's got it set with the violin thing, right? But like, what's Beethoven on guitar? Can you even do that? And it's just like anything else. There are chords, right? You can play Beethoven with chords, and this is kind of like the revelation that I remember when I first understood on guitar. I wish I had kind of thought about it earlier this way. And we're just going to talk about how really any kind of melodic thing, anything you do on any instrument really comes down to chords, all right? So I think just kind of like as an example, let's take just like some kind of lead thing, right? It's going to look like this. Right? You can think of this as like a lick, just some kind of melody thing. I just came up with it literally just before turning this camera on, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start on the 12th fret of the B string, and then maybe just do a hammer on B to a C note to a B note, back to here. Now it's like, okay, well, so 12, 13, 12, 14 G, back to that B on the 12th fret, a D, the 15th fret on the B string, and then back to the 12th fret on the G string, okay? It's like, well, what is this? This is just like a lick or something. Maybe if like you really have like your scale shapes down, you can see like, oh, this comes from, maybe he's just playing something in the E minor scale or the G major scale or whatever. Maybe it's like a pentatonic variation or something like that, right? Well, it's just kind of like that, something like that would be something that maybe like a violin player would play, and like, how do I choose to accompany that on a guitar, right? So let's really break it down with the notes and what might happen with a chord over this, right? So you start on a B note, okay? And then you kind of do a little flourish. I might play it a little different each time, but basically, what are the touch tones of like what's happening in this lick, right? I'm dancing around this B note. I go up, the highest note I have is a D, and then it just seems to kind of resolve on this G note, right? So I would say the three most important notes in this little lick that I'm playing here are the B, the D, and the G, okay? So that's why music theory really comes in super handy here, because like, all right, well, what do I want to put under this melody that I have here? Do I want to do like a B note or like a B chord? B major sounds terrible with that, right? Well, the first thing you might notice there is like, all right, well, it has a B and a D. Maybe I could play a B minor. That doesn't totally seem to fit, right? But that's why when you really think about like the notes that come in there, like a B, a D, and a G, well, there's one chord that has those three notes. It's a triad chord, and it's G major, right? That's why even just landing on that G note sounds so right, even though we haven't even played that. We haven't even played a G yet in that phrase, but it leads back home to G major, right? So I guess the revelation that I'm just kind of like making a long-winded excuse to talk about here is that this is just playing around in G, okay? So maybe like that's doing one thing. You can just kind of like play a G major to accompany that, or any of the other notes or chords in the key of G. But I think really thinking about phrasing like that and almost kind of like reverse engineering a piece of music is really like an important revelation to have as a guitar player, as just any kind of musician, to really kind of make those connections between like how a melody is working, how you're choosing to accompany said melody in a chord, right? And I think this is just kind of like a nice little example, because that's a great way of just like using notes in a key, the key of G major, and then just seeing how the intervals of those notes will really push you in a certain direction back home to G, even though we haven't even played or established that a G note is in that phrase, okay? You can play any of the other notes, right? Let's take some of the other major chords in that key. The three major chords in the key of G are G, C, and D. Maybe we can end on each of those notes. Instead of going to a G, let's end on a C. All right? Now that's an interesting musical phrase, but it doesn't have the resolution or the finality of it. Or a... There's the D, right? That G is really, everything is pushing you back home to G. So once you kind of understand how that works, I think you can really kind of take your playing in a way and kind of push things in a certain musical progression, right? So that's why, you know, when we play these shows where it's just like instrumental stuff, and you want to make something sound interesting, and you have a world-class violin player like I have the luxury of having currently, you know, maybe I can accompany what he's doing with that home chord in certain situations. Maybe I can kind of move it around, hit him with a C major 7 over what he's playing, and that'll sound like a little bit interesting, you know? But it'll never sound bad because you can always kind of choose to harmonize any of these things with each other. Yeah, ever since I really started thinking about chords in that way, there's so much stuff that you can do with it, right? So whenever you see a piece of music, you find out what key it's in. You can kind of like discern what key a piece of music is in just by looking at the chords. I have other videos on this. Also my Patreon, I go through this from like the ground up. I'm just gonna upload another lesson tonight with a little bit of like kind of fingerstyle percussive playing. If you're interested, definitely check that out. But that's why it's so important to know what key you're in, because then you're like, all right, this is just a song in the key of G. You don't even necessarily need to be able to like read the chords. Once you kind of understand what is possible within a key, most, you know, songs kind of generally stay in one key anyways for the most part. I think you'll become a much better player and be able to distinguish stuff and just like learn stuff a lot quicker, right? So when you think of like, all right, you see something in the key of G, make sure you know the chords in the key of G. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp half diminished, and back to G. And then just kind of like know a few of the positions, right? That's why like those scale shapes that everybody kind of drills is really important, because that can kind of like help, you know, you just identify something. Oh, maybe that E minor position pentatonic relative minor is like the spot for something like that. That'll sound good. It's just, it really just makes all these connections between your hands and your brain. You know? Again, like I said, I see this as a revelation when I first understood kind of like the thought process behind these things. I think like the first probably 10 years of my guitar playing were just based on just shapes. And be like, all right, I know like these forms of different like even bar chords and shapes and stuff, and I know that each one of them has like a mode or something that goes along with that. But what I think really kind of gets overlooked is the musicality of what's happening behind any piece of music or any piece of song. So maybe one challenge that I could give to you is just find some melody, either create your own melody just by your ear, right? And don't worry about the chords, kind of like I just did with that. And then really kind of like diagnose what you just created, and then try to like match the chord with it, or find out where the resolution is, or choose maybe another chord in that same key to see how that affects that resolution. Again, like I said, something that I do with my playing a lot is instead of resolving on the 1 chord, I'll always push it to the 4 chord. All that means is instead of resolving on G in the key of G, I try to push things towards the C chord, right? G, A, B, C, the 4 chord, right? So this ending on like a C major 7, I think is kind of like a really kind of like, you know, pretty interesting thing to do. But traditionally, that's always going to make you want to go home to a G, right? So this is something that you can apply to your playing right now. Just take small phrases, I think it's best to do. And then if you want to, maybe just take like a lyrical melody from a song that you like. Try to figure it out by ear, and then try to match the chords to that, and kind of see, you'll see that really triads is where it's at, right? If you have any kind of melody that's heavy on a B, a D, or a G, if you look up Ultimate Guitar chord charts or whatever, you're going to see the G major is 99% of the time the chord that goes with that, right? So think of single notes, where they are, instead of just being like, oh, okay, like, you know, if this is your melody, don't be like, okay, well, 7B to 5E to 7 to 5. Be like, okay, the 7th fret on the B string, F sharp to A to B to A, F sharp, back down to E, F sharp. Think of like what that could go along with, think of the accompanying chords, and then really I think that's one of the best things that you can absolutely ever do for your musicianship. And if you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website, and check out the Patreon. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.